Hello, this is my review on The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So this is the book that I had to read for my ARP. I really like this book. It was great to read. I usually don't read a lot of books, so this book really made me want to read more. I liked everything about this book. The characters, the message, just the whole setting it's in. Written a long time ago. I think it was in the 1800s this was written. I've never read anything from Oscar Wilde, so I didn't know what I was expecting, but it was really, really good. And I like how this book also includes the notes in the front and the back. I referenced a lot of the notes at the back to have a deeper understanding, a more deeper understanding of what was happening in the book and in real life. And I learned a lot about Oscar Wilde just reading the notes, and I actually feel like it added a lot more to the experience of reading this and the story of the author, and I just thought it was really cool to learn about that. And I think I would recommend this to other people who want to start reading themselves or have just not been reading a lot like me. Understanding a lot of these concepts were kind of challenging sometimes. So while I was reading the book, I really questioned life, and specifically how Dorian lives his and Lord Henry Wotton's thoughts on life. Their outlook is just so different. I don't have the same understanding as Lord Henry Wotton does about life. He's more cynical about it, and Dorian just follows everything that he says, and I think that's how he starts living the life of sin and constantly seeking pleasure. The characters in the book are amazing. I love how how dynamic the characters are. My favorite character has to be Basil Hallward, because throughout the story he's just an innocent guy who painted a portrait and gets blamed on for painting a portrait. I just feel so bad for him. Dorian and Lord Henry Wotton, I don't agree with most of their outlooks and what they've done, especially Lord Henry. I feel like he was the reason that Dorian ended up the way he did. I think when Basil Hallward got stabbed, I think that's when I started hating Dorian. I started not liking what he was doing. First, it started with Sybil Vane. He just treated her so badly. I think that was the beginning of his descent to evil. At first, I did like him. Dorian was such an innocent person that I just didn't expect him to turn into such a bad guy. He just turned into a criminal. So the language this was written in is obviously English, but it's more, I think it's Old English. It's very easy to understand if you know the basics of English. This is set in London, so a lot of the times I imagine them speaking in British accents. I think a part that was way too long for me was probably the chapter. There's a whole chapter where it just describes what Dorian has been up to, and I think that was when my attention started straying, because I think I like reading dialogues more. I couldn't really pay attention to that chapter as much as the other chapters, because most of that chapter was just explaining what happened during that time skip. So the exciting part, I think the most exciting part was probably when Basil died. I know it's the worst part because I love him as a character, but when he died, everything just started getting worse for Dorian. I think that was the climax. So after reading this, I just really thought about growing old, because that's what Dorian's afraid of. Just starting to get wrinkles, and his hair starts to dull, his hair is not as golden anymore. I think that's what really scared him, which is why he wanted to switch his age with the portrait. After reading the ending where Dorian dies because he tries to free himself from the portrait, I learned that you shouldn't live life like Dorian did. You should not think of life the way he did. I think he was just very selfish in a way. He just wanted to keep his appearance young and youthful. So when it started happening, he just brushed it off and he started seeking constant pleasure in things. He would do drugs like opium. He would go to opium dens. He killed Basil Hallward. He had no remorse for that, and I just felt that was not how you should react to killing someone. He treated Sybil Vane poorly, and most of his friends that was with him through the time skip would often go off the radar. The reputation was just ruined. And actually reading Dorian Gray made me grow as a reader, because personally I have not read many books in the past 8 years. I have not picked up a book and really absorbed myself into it. But when I read Dorian Gray, I really absorbed myself into it because I knew I had to finish it. I didn't feel burdened to finish it. I wanted to finish it. And I haven't felt that in a long time, and I think I might start reading books again. I think the most meaningful part of the story was probably the ending, because after all the things Dorian has done, he knows that he's responsible for like everything that has happened to him and everything that has happened to the people he's been close with, and he realizes that his conscience keeps reminding him that what he's doing is bad. So at the end, he tries to escape from it because he feels that if he ruined the painting, then he'd be free from it. But unfortunately, that was not the case. After he stabbed the painting, he basically stabbed himself, and he died because of that. And I feel like that's very meaningful. I feel like it's like once you start doing so many bad things and not thinking about the repercussions, it will be too late. Dorian Gray was a really good read. I really recommend people to read this if they're interested in picking up a book for the first time, or not for the first time, but someone who hasn't read for a long time like me. This book is really good. You get really absorbed into it, and you learn a lot about the times back then in the Victorian era, I think. Life back then was way different than now, so I really like learning about it, the history of the time period this was in, so it was a really great read. I might look at other Oscar Wilde works. I don't know if he has more books, but I'll try to look into it. And yeah, that was my review on The Picture of Dorian Gray.